Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. Thank you, Joao, for the introduction. So like he said, we are going to shift into something a little different now. We've been spending the day exploring all kinds of fascinating innovations in science and technology, but now we're going to talk about relationships and human connection and why the future of health is social. So first, we're going to look backward and explore the history a little bit, specifically looking at the rise of mental health in recent years and the focus especially on a topic of loneliness. And then we're going to look ahead into the future and explore why it is time for a social health revolution and what it is that I actually mean when I say that. So first, looking backward. Now, we all know that the way we understand health and the actions that we actually take to be healthy are constantly evolving, right? Thanks in large part to the work of many of the people here today. We're constantly learning through scientific discoveries, advancements in modern medicine, through new policies, through changes in social norms. And this is a really good thing, right? It used to be that humans made sacrifices to the gods in order to cure illnesses. Thank goodness we don't do that anymore. It used to be that we smoked cigarettes without knowing that they caused lung cancer, right? Now if you smoke, you know the risks, at least. So this is constantly in evolution. And as a result of this, humanity today is actually healthier than we have ever been in history. For example, we can see this with child mortality rates, which have dropped from over 40% to less than 5%. We can also see it in global life expectancy, which has increased by more than 40 years, which is truly incredible. So the way we understand health and the actions we take to be healthy evolve to our benefit. Now, most recently, the dominant narrative about health that has really taken hold, particularly in Western countries, focuses in particular on two aspects: physical health and mental health. When you think about your individual well-being, this is the dominant narrative, with physical health being about our bodies and mental health being about our minds at the most basic level. So we now know in modern culture that to be healthy, to live well, we need to exercise, we need to eat nutritious foods, we need to get a good night's sleep in order to take care of our bodies and be physically strong. We also now know that to live well, we need to practice things like mindfulness or going to therapy or managing our stress in other ways to take care of our minds and emotions and thoughts and be mentally healthy. So in the past 10 to 20 years, we've really seen this piece in particular, mental health, go from what was very taboo to a mainstream priority, right? Mental health has gone from very stigmatized to talked openly by politicians, by celebrities, by teachers, by families at the dinner table, right? Mental health has evolved so much to take precedent in our culture. And with this, we've seen the growth of its own economy, right? So in 2020, the global mental health industry was valued at $380 billion, and 10 years later, it's expected to surpass $530 billion. Now, in particular, in recent years, we've seen a lot of attention on one specific issue, which is loneliness. Raise your hand if you've heard of what many call a loneliness epidemic. Right, almost everyone. So in the last 5 years in particular, I've seen loneliness go from what was a relatively niche topic to something that's actually a global health priority. So here in the UK, you got a head start. You were way ahead of the rest of us, appointing the first minister for loneliness actually back in 2018. Japan later followed suit in 2021. But we've also seen around the world the COVID-19 pandemic really put loneliness on the map and in headlines in every single major outlet in the world. Even though it had been an issue for a long time, that really catalyzed a bigger conversation about recognizing loneliness as an issue. And in 2023, just to give more examples, the now former US Surgeon General declared loneliness an epidemic in the US, which is where I live. And the World Health Organization launched an international commission on social connection. So this has been getting a lot of attention. And this spotlight is for good reason, right? 1 in 4 people worldwide, according to a recent global survey, feel lonely on a regular basis. And furthermore, decades now of research have shown that this has serious consequences for people's health. Let me adjust that. From increasing our risk of things like heart disease and diabetes and stroke and dementia, weakening our immune systems, but also to actually increasing the likelihood of premature mortality. The spotlight on loneliness has also been incredibly impactful. So the attention has helped really destigmatize conversations about our connection needs. It's helped normalize the fact that we all go through times in our life when we feel a little disconnected. And this attention on loneliness has also really helped catalyze more action and more solutions. So it's helped to support and advance and inspire different ways of addressing this in all different sectors. And some of these are wonderful and effective. Things like nonprofits who are building community at the local level. There are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of incredible nonprofits doing work on the ground to connect people and bring them together. Or approaches like social prescribing in healthcare, which again is much more common here in the UK at this point. So social prescribing is the idea of screening for things like loneliness or other needs that we might have outside of traditional medicine and linking people to care for those. Some of the solutions that have been emerging are a little more controversial. So for example, AI companions, right? A lot of people increasingly are turning to artificial intelligence for emotional support, for friendship, for love. So to summarize so far, at this point in history, most people understand that health is physical and mental, that we really need both to live well. Increasingly, so many people have recognized that loneliness is far too common and that it can be extremely deadly, as much so as things like smoking and obesity. So where do we go from here? What's coming? How do we build on this momentum and actually enter the next stage in our evolution of understanding what it means to be healthy as an individual? And that brings us to looking ahead. It is time to recognize that health is not only physical and mental, it is also social. It's time to turn off the spotlight that has been on loneliness and actually turn on the floodlights to illuminate this broader theme of social health. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you think about your overall health and well-being as a temple, social health is the essential pillar that is built up from connection and community. So while physical health is about our bodies and mental health is about our minds, social health is about our relationships. Now, these pillars are all interconnected, right? When you strengthen your body through exercise or sleep, for example, your mind and relationships benefit as well, right? It's also true that when you strengthen your relationships through quality time or volunteering or connection in other ways, your body and mind benefit too. And if you imagine this as the front of the temple, right, there are sides and backs to it. So there could be other pillars that are important, like spiritual health, for example. There's also the environment around the temple, right? So thinking about things that us in public health typically call social determinants or social drivers of health. Things like healthcare, education, employment, housing, all of those things in the environment that are also influencing our individual health. So just to make this even more concrete and think about social health in your own life, what does it look like to be socially healthy? Well, it includes having close one-on-one relationships with our friends, our family, our coworkers, our neighbors. It includes having regular interaction with a variety of people, whether that's casual interaction, whether that's deep conversation and close emotional intimacy. It's that full breadth. It's also about having a sense of community and belonging, feeling like we're part of something bigger than just us. And while loneliness has gotten a lot of attention in recent years, there are many other kinds of social health challenges too. You might not feel lonely because you feel emotionally close to your friends and family, but maybe you live in a different city and you don't get to see them in person often, so you're physically kind of isolated. Or maybe you're sort of missing out on the value of having a really close connection at work or getting to know your neighbors. Or maybe you interact online more often than in person, right? That's true for me a lot of the time, unfortunately, due to how our lives are designed right now, and I'm sure many others can relate. Or maybe you've gone through a significant life change, like having kids, or starting a new job, or getting married, or retiring, right? And as a result of that change, you need to rethink your connection habits. So these are some of the ways that we can start thinking about our own social health. Now, I say that it's time to really expand from the spotlight that we've had on loneliness, and also to evolve and broaden from our understanding of health as physical and mental, and really to elevate this dimension, this social dimension of our health, because the language that we use matters. The narrative that we tell matters. It shapes what we think, it shapes what we do, and it shapes who we actually become. So there are a few reasons why I've seen this framing of social health be really effective. And the first is that research shows most people underestimate the importance of connection for longevity. In fact, people who lack social support are up to 53% more likely to die from any cause. And there are many other studies that I could cite as examples of this. And yet, researchers have found that most people don't realize that. In fact, most doctors don't realize that connection is as important as things like exercise and sleep and nutrition for our health. So just like the language of mental health helped us to take our emotions and our thoughts more seriously, the language of social health helps us to take our relationships more seriously and give them more weight and more of a priority. The second reason why I've seen this framing of social health be effective and resonate with people is because it's actually relevant to each and every one of us. So as important as it is to address loneliness for the 1 in 4 people worldwide who experience it, every single one of us can benefit from being intentional about connection and from prioritizing our relationships, not just those who are lonely. You need to take care of your physical health even if you don't have cancer, right? You need to take care of your mental health even if you're not depressed. And in that same vein, we need to take care of our social health even if we're not lonely. And the final reason why I've seen this framing be really effective is because it's empowering, right? In my work advising organizations across different sectors, I've found that a lot of leaders will say when we bring up loneliness with our participants, it often makes them uncomfortable, pushes them away, might even make them feel worse. But in contrast, it's motivating to shift from focusing on deficits to assets, from obstacles to opportunities, from reactive to proactive. And what I've learned having conversations with thousands of people around the world about this is that people want to know, what can I do in my own life to be socially healthy, to have better connections, right? We want to feel hopeful and empowered, and that's what this language can help us do. So it's not just me, I'm one of a growing number of people who see the value in this language, and it is truly shifting. So we can see this, for example, in Google search trends for what is social health, which have skyrocketed in recent years. This is a graph of US data, but the global data shows a similar trend of that upward arc. We can also see this in mentions of social health in books, which have increased dramatically in recent decades. And we can see this in world leaders like the former US Surgeon General, who said, just like our physical and mental health, our social health is critical to our well-being. So increasingly, people are differentiating social health from physical and mental health, and this is just the beginning. I believe that social health is today where mental health was 10 to 15 years ago. Soon it will be part of the cultural lexicon and part of our everyday language. So what is that going to look like in our society? Well, here are a few examples of how social health will change the world that we live in a similar way to how mental health has changed the world that we live in. So just like social prescribing, which I mentioned earlier, has become a priority here in UK's healthcare system, this practice will spread in other countries so that doctors and other providers can really help patients live healthier in this way. Just like many employers offer mental health benefits, they will offer social health benefits and implement programs to foster connection among employees, whether they're in person or hybrid or remote. Just like many schools teach gym class to help students develop their physical strength and perhaps mindfulness to help develop their mental health, teachers increasingly will teach connection class to help students with their social health. Just like technology has become embedded in our professional lives as a work tool, technology will increasingly become embedded in our social lives for better and for worse, right? We've already seen this with social media, but we're increasingly going to see this with AI. And lastly, just like there are gyms that offer physical fitness classes and personal trainers to help you kind of meet your physical goals, increasingly we will see social fitness gyms and connection coaches who help people meet their social goals. All of these examples are things that are already happening, and we're only going to see more of these in the years to come. So with that, the future of health is social. I will leave it there, and I think we're going to have some time for questions. Thank you. I wanted to do a connection activity, but I don't think we have time, so that's
connection
okay.
activity. Right. What kind of connection activity?
Do a little activity, make everyone try this out. But
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah?
Do you have time? We have time, yeah.
Shall we practice what I'm talking about here today? Okay.
Don't look at me like that.
We'll take 2 minutes and actually practice so we can feel this experientially. So I want to know, raise your hand if today at some point you have asked or been asked, what do you do for work? What do you do? Right. Multiple times probably, right? This is kind of a go-to thing we talk about, especially at networking events or things like that. But the research shows that people in different cultures value connection when it goes a level deeper, right? What's actually meaningful to us is when we go beyond small talk into deeper connection. The research also shows that vulnerability, right, opening up a little bit more deeply is essential to developing more meaningful relationships in the long term. So we're not going to do something that meaningful, but we'll do something a little smaller. So we're going to take 1 minute, and you're going to turn to the person next to you, and you're going to each answer this question. Who was the person who had the most influence on you growing up, and why? So turn to the person next to you. We'll have 1 minute each.
So
Time it.
Who was it for you?
Good, fun.
What was your person? What was your most?
For me?
Yeah.
It was my brother.
Your mother. Okay.
So he was someone I was always very close to, and who raised me kind of like his daughter.
Amazing. Yeah.
Who's yours?
I'm an only child, so I'd say it was my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was the only child. I didn't have any cousins, so very lonely. That's why I like to cook.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So the problem now is how are you going to get them to shut up?
Don't worry, I got it. Give him 15 more seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so wrap up what you're telling the other person. Share a few closing thoughts there. And now as you wrap up, what I want you to what I invite you to think about is the fact that interactions like that, which we might discount and think, it's just fun, interactions like these and the relationships that we build over time, they might make us feel happy and energized, but they also influence our susceptibility to diseases, and they influence how long we live. It is much more important to foster connection like this, but also with your loved ones in your real lives than we realize. And we need to appreciate that that is part of our health as much as all the other things that we've been talking about today.
And you can keep going over drinks, which will help,
with the
right?
drinks, yeah.
I mean, this is sort of a side question, but people have been talking about drinking as a social fluid. Mm-hmm. Lately, we're hearing that you can't drink, it's terribly for your health. How do you balance the two? Because a lot of social activities... It's a serious question. a lot of social activities revolve around
Sure.
drinking. Especially, I'm from the Mediterranean, which is basically...
Yeah.
You get
No one's ever asked me that question. I like it.
Okay. What do you
Okay, well, I'm going to give you all permission to drink as a way to lubricate your social muscles, for
Okay,
sure,
it's good for
absolutely.
you.
I think there's controversy too, right? Like
Yeah.
red wine can be healthy for you, so,
All right.
it's all in moderation.
I do want to ask you a serious question. You mentioned that loneliness does have a terrible impact on your health. You compare it to smoking, lack of exercise, a poor diet. What is happening physiologically with our bodies
Sure.
when we're lonely?
Yeah, so there are a few different pathways, but one of the kind of most popular explanations in the research literature is this idea of stress buffering. So when we experience a stressor like a wild animal coming at us, or feeling thirsty and not having access to water, feeling hunger and not having access to food, our bodies go into a stress mode, right? That releases cortisol, adrenaline, and when that's chronic, it causes a weaker immune system. It makes us more susceptible to diseases. It increases inflammation and so on. There's this whole stress pathway that happens. Well, loneliness, when it's chronic, triggers that same pathway. And so over time, that can really take a toll. Whereas, in contrast, when you have supportive relationships, that acts as a buffer, right? It's actually healing to talk about things that you're going through with someone who cares about you, right? And to show up for them when they're going through something. That has truly healing powers physiologically as well as psychologically.
And you mentioned the lack of community nowadays. People might feel it's something which it's hard to do something about where you're an individual, but you've mentioned before a great example, Super Neighbors in France, in Paris.
Yeah.
Paris of all places.
Yes.
You lived there, you had an experience of that city. Tell us a little bit about Super Neighbors as an example of a grassroots movement.
Yeah.
People took it upon themselves to solve this problem.
Absolutely. So there's this wonderful group in Paris called the Super Neighbors, who started with a man, Patrick Bernard, who said, when I leave the house, I don't say hello to anyone. And I've lived here for however many years. This is strange and too bad. And so he decided to set up a table the length of the road, and have 1,000 people show up and share a meal together. And his neighbors thought he was totally crazy. His wife thought he was crazy, but they agreed with the principle. And sure enough, several months later, they set up a table the length of the road, and over 1,000 people showed up to share a meal. And that catalyzed this whole, now it's an organization for them, where they run community initiatives, where they have all kinds of resources and activities and events. They partner with the city of Paris to improve shared gathering spaces, to activate them, and they have a whole vision for how to take that further. But it started with just one person saying, I'd like to say hello to more people in the community where I live. And I really love that example. Yeah. And in that day, I spent a weekend with them, and in that time, I made more friends than in the 6 months that I had lived in Paris previously.
Amazing. And I know your next project is going to be looking at how different cultures treat this topic of socializing and how important it is. for one culture compared to others. Tell us a little bit more about the cultural differences that you've found so far and what you expect to find further in your country.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about this. You know, there are certainly cultural differences in terms of individualist countries, collectivist countries, and the kind of social norms that we have around connection and community building. But I really want to dive into that further and really tell the stories from different cultures. I was just in Bhutan in the fall and got to speak with people who lived in small villages who, when they ring the bell on their house at night, it means that everyone in the town is expected to come over for dinner. And if they don't come, they're going to go fetch them and bring them over. And so I think it's really interesting to think about what are the examples that we can pull from different countries, different cultures. How can we learn from all of those together and think about the society that we want to design going forward for all of us. So if you have ideas from your travels or the places that you live, I'd love to hear from you.
Drinking?
Pardon?
Drinking?
Yeah, over wine, yes.
Anyway, thank you so much. It was great. Thank you for bringing this very important topic to us. Thank you.